Hi, my name is Peter Devine, and today I'd like to talk about a paper that I wrote with my co-authors Sanuri, Isabelle, Lola, Emerson, and Kelly, entitled Destructive Criticism in Software Code Review Impacts Inclusion. And this is basically talking about how destructive criticism, which is inconsiderate or non-specific feedback, can, in the form of code review, can negatively impact the diversity of a software team. So first of all, previous research has shown that software discussions within the field of software engineering can include negative sentiment, discrimination, profanity, insults, and toxic discussions. And many people have talked about their experiences of this within the field, and as well stating why this is one of the reasons that field of tech and the field of software engineering has such a bad diversity problem. So we look at software engineering discussions through software code review. Software code review is feedback from your peers or colleagues on your code and has many known benefits. Research has shown that it's very beneficial for software engineering teams. But there have also been reports that it can create a toxic environment. With this tweet, evidence stating that code review can be honest or nice, indicating a belief that there's a dichotomy between either being accurate or pleasant in your code review. So this sort of brutally honest without being pleasant code review was termed pushback by some research done at Google, and they found that while this sort of pushback is relatively rare in code review at Google, when it does occur, it can have very negative repercussions. So we look at code review through the lens of destructive criticism. So destructive criticism is negative feedback that's non-specific and inconsiderate, and other fields such as applied psychology have shown that it provokes a negative reaction in recipients and reduces productivity and motivation to continue working on a task. Particularly in this research, the impact of destructive criticism can be higher for women for some types of tasks. So we look at this, we probe this phenomenon by doing an online questionnaire, which we did using vignettes, in which the participant is asked to imagine that they've submitted a piece of code and then received either destructive or constructive feedback, destructive, constructive criticism for that piece of code. And then we asked participants how they think that would affect their mood, their motivation, and how they would respond to the criticism, as well as the perceived helpfulness, validity, and appropriateness of that feedback. And this was done through a mixture of Likert scales and open-ended questions, and was randomized so that every participant got a piece of destructive and a piece of constructive criticism. We also asked participants about the frequency with which they've encountered destructive criticism in their professional experience, and how what their opinions are of destructive criticism more generally. Finally, asking demographic questions to correlate to their previous answers. So we solicited participants for our questionnaire by posting adverts on social media and online communities, and we got 93 complete responses, 43 men, 43 women, 3 non-binary responses, and 4 non-disclosures of gender. And on average, our respondents had 7.8 years of development experience. So as we can see, participants in general agree that the feedback is likely to improve code, is valid and appropriate if the feedback was constructive, but they were much more likely to say that the feedback was they're much less likely to say the feedback would improve their code, was valid, and was appropriate if that feedback was destructive. Similarly, we can see that in general, when given constructive feedback, participants are motivated to continue working on that task, on that project, and with that developer, whereas for destructive, when given destructive criticism, participants are much less likely to want to continue working on the task and on the project, but especially much less motivated to continue working with that developer. We also see that our recipients report giving non-specific and inconsiderate feedback to 27.1%, but they report receiving non-specific and inconsiderate feedback to a much higher degree, indicating a potential interesting gap between the level of people that report getting feedback and giving feedback. Finally, we look at the general opinions on destructive criticism, and we find that most people agree that destructive criticism is harmful and will cause a negative reaction for the recipient, but there's a much more a broader diversity of opinion for the question. When receiving code review comments, I don't mind getting inconsiderate feedback as long as the feedback helps to improve the code quality. And this diversity of thought is highlighted in some of the long form answers, with some people saying this is a hack is not negative at all, it's easier to parse, even if it can appear harsh or inconsiderate, while others state that when code is bad, it should be considered, it should be communicated in a considerate way so that the person can learn, indicating an interesting gap, again, a dichotomy between the schools of thought on this question. We have a demographic breakdown for many of our answers here, and we find that women are much less likely to say that destructive criticism is appropriate, less likely to be motivated to continue working with a developer after receiving destructive criticism, and much less likely to agree with the fact with the statement that they don't mind getting destructive feedback if it improves code quality compared to men. And all of these are statistically significant to at least a 0.05 p-value. So to finish up, we find that destructive criticism has negative impacts across the board, but these are especially pronounced in women, indicating that this may be one of the reasons that so many areas of software engineering have such poor gender diversity. We also find that there are conflicting opinions on destructive criticism generally. Some people think that it can be appropriate as long as it's accurate. Some people think that criticism should always be considerate. And this throws up interesting questions for how we can improve discourse in code review, potentially giving feedback on feedback so that people understand when they're being destructive. Thank you very much for listening.